Program funding for the Organic Odyssey was provided by the California Certified Organic Farmers Foundation, as well as the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. Visit their web pages or social media for all their amazing content and guidance on everything organic. Support for the Organic Odyssey is provided in part by the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. For more information or to support the center, please visit organic.calpoly.edu. That's organic.calpoly.edu for the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. Support for the Organic Odyssey is provided in part by AgCom Central. Visit AgCom Central on twitch.tv or youtube.com for all content ag-related. That's AgCom Central on twitch.tv or youtube.com for AgCom Central.
Hello everyone, my name is Emery Pura and I'm here with my co-host Amanda Kidd. Welcome to the 6th episode of Organic Odyssey, journeying through sustainable farming at Cal Poly. Today we will be looking at some TikToks that we found, and let's start by Amanda introducing yourself.
Hey guys, my name is Amanda Kidd and I'm a second year agricultural communications major, and I'm super excited to watch these TikToks today.
I'm Dr. Matt Grieshop, Director of the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research.
Hi guys, my name is Sierra Fugman. I'm also a second year ag comms major. Thanks for having me today.
Perfect. Okay, if the production team would like to play the first TikTok, and this one will be about non-believers of organic production.
Let's talk about why organic is a scam. If you love organic and you want to keep eating it, that's great. I'm not trying to argue with you. I just like to put this information out there because I don't think a lot of people know about it. The short of it is that organic is really just like a marketing scheme to fearmonger conventional produce and get you to buy more expensive produce. What about the chemicals? Well, let me tell you, they still use chemicals on organic produce. They just use different chemicals that are approved for organic produce. But those chemicals are less effective, which means they have to use more of them, and you're gonna find a caterpillar in your broccoli. But guess what? There's nothing wrong with chemicals. You know where chemicals come from? Science. And if you're the kind of person who was reposting all those things on Instagram a couple of years ago about how much you love science and you're the first in line to get your vaccine, well, science. Not only is there nothing wrong with the chemicals, but these chemicals make produce more affordable and accessible to lower income communities. The stigma that conventional produce is bad for you is not only inaccurate, but it's like kind of privilegey. But Mallory, organic farming is better for the environment. Wrong-o! Organic and conventional farming are both bad for the environment. The primary impact that agriculture has on the environment is the amount of land that it uses, and organic farming actually uses more land in proportion to the amount of food that it produces. If you really care about the environment, the two things you should be doing is buying local produce and embracing GMOs. But GMOs are terrible. Wrong again. GMOs are actually super cool. All GMO produce are different, but some produce is genetically modified to do things like make it more nutritious, reduce the amount of pesticides they need to use on them. And in the case of the Granny Smith apple that I learned about today, they can be used to reduce browning and make produce last longer, reducing food waste. On top of all of that, I think that certified GMO label is probably the worst offender of all of the marketing scare tactic things. The list of GMO crops that actually exist in the US is fairly short. Companies literally just pay money to get that little stamp on their boxes, even when none of the ingredients have GMO versions. It's like putting a sticker on a car that says it doesn't fly. Yeah, of course. Because there's no such thing as a flying car yet. I am not anti-organic in the sense that I refuse to buy things that are organic. That would be so dumb. I'm also not saying that all produce are created equal, but when I shop, I try to focus on things that are fresh, local, and sustainable. Winter, when there's no farmer's market and I'm forced to shop at Whole Foods, if the organic apples look better this week, I will buy them because that means they're less likely to go bad in my fridge and I'm not going to waste them. I am by no means an expert on this, so don't attack me if I got like a little detail wrong, but all my information came from the FDA and Food Science Babe, who I will tag. Science is cool, don't get played.
Okay, well, after watching that, I feel like it would have been nice, because she felt very passionate about what she was saying, if maybe she listed some of the sources she got each detail from and maybe just put it in the bio or something. Sierra, how'd you feel after watching that?
Did you guys pick up on that tone? Because it's like kind of privilegey. Yeah. I would love to check out those tags that she was talking about and
Look at them
see
more.
how credible her sources were. But I mean, I respect anyone that's super passionate about something. I do think she had some good things to say. I'm not the most informed person on this topic, but I think Dr. Grimm, what did you think about what she said?
Dr. Grieshop.
Grieshop.
It's okay, Grieshop Grimm. I think that's the first time that's happened. I'm doubting it'll be the last. So it was an interesting exhibition, and there's it. It was interesting to me because it kind of went all over the place, and there were some really consistent, I think, misconceptions present. So the first one I'd start with is the comment about chemicals. So as a scientist, chemical is an incredibly vague term. I mean, water is a chemical. Gasoline is a combination of chemicals. This table in front of me is made out of chemicals. I think oftentimes folks who are out of the agricultural sphere use chemicals as a surrogate for maybe pesticides, maybe fertilizers, which I would say are inputs. And so from the standpoint of chemicals, organic production uses inputs that are sourced almost entirely from natural sources, meaning we did an episode on organic fertilizers. So these organic fertilizers are being produced from composts, from animal byproducts, things like that. Conventional fertilizers are produced from fossil fuels. That's where most of them come from. I mean, we mine potash and potassium, but our nitrogen is coming from natural gas primarily. In the realm of pesticides, we do have some botanical compounds, which of course are made up of chemicals that are used for organics, but we also use a variety of living organisms. So insects that eat other insects would be one example. Also microbes and things like that. And those are, again, all living things are made up of chemicals, but I don't think that's what's being talked about there. It is true, the synthetic chemicals that are used synthetic pesticides that are used in conventional ag are much more powerful. You don't need to use as much of them. They're also very powerful, and they have massive environmental impacts. I've been in the pest management research education business for a long time, so yes, I mean, the EPA standards we have for most of our pesticides do keep these things at arguably a very safe level. My focus typically, and the reason why why I question when we should be using those things, is really more on the environmental damage. For example, I'm an entomologist. I study insects. Insecticides kill insects. If you apply broad spectrum insecticides that do a really good job at killing pests, they kill everything else too. And that's one thing that you're getting when you buy organic produce, is you're getting produce that isn't using tools of that sort of power and mass, sort of indiscriminate, just killing power, frankly. Whether or not there's a health benefit is something that gets debated a lot, and frankly, ultimately, I would agree with what she's saying about produce. Eating more produce is good for you. We know this. The source of that produce, if you can get local, that's better. The fresher it is, the better. I think organic produce, really the benefits we get from that really come back to building soil, and it really comes back to trying to minimize some of these ecological impacts that happen when we use these more powerful technologies. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'm going to be talking for a little while. Another one that was in there was in terms of the environmental impact, and that one's really nuanced. It is true, if we use synthetic fertilizers and synthetic pesticides, and it allows us to grow food with less human labor and typically at a higher density per land area, but at a huge fossil fuel expense in terms of the fertility. The Haber-Bosch process, which is where we get synthetic nitrogen, is a major contributor to our fossil fuel use and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Uses a tremendous amount of natural gas to run that process. In organic fertility, we're using, again, byproducts, things like that. There are some larger questions to unpack there, thinking about, okay, well, if we gave up fossil fuel-based fertilizers, how would we run fertility? And that's a huge question. And so it's kind of gray there. And then there was the genetically modified organisms. And so, of course, in certified organic production as it stands right now, genetically modified crops are not allowed. the produce thing is really weird to me. She's absolutely right on the GM labeling thing. I've never understood that. The reality is, I mean, she talked about a short list. The short list is corn, soybeans, cotton. Those are really the first three. We did have a Flavor Saver tomato that was on the market for like a hot minute, but it was so unpalatable that it died in the marketplace. We have GMO papayas from Hawaii. That's a minor genetic modification to provide resistance to ring spot virus, which pretty much wiped out the Hawaiian papaya industry. There is the Arctic apple, which they do have a Granny Smith and they do have a Fuji. That one to me has always been weird. Like the food wastage thing doesn't track. I mean, there's a phenyloxidase gene that's been put back into that apple to basically keep it from browning after you cut it. And so, and that's really a bonus to the processed food industry. I mean, me personally, I don't cut up apples and leave them in my fridge. You know, if I cut up an apple, I eat it. If I want it to last, like when I used to put them in my kids' lunch boxes, I'd put a little lemon juice on it, which does the same thing and keeps it from browning. It just shuts down that physiological pathway that's present in a lot of fruit. In terms of GMs, again, I mean, it's complicated. Right now in certified organic, you can't use genetically modified crops, and there's a lot of very complicated feelings about their presence. As someone who's really engaged in sustainable agriculture, for me, it always really comes down to not the technology, but how it's applied. By far and away, the most common GM traits in crops are herbicide resistance, specifically for glyphosate, otherwise known as Roundup. And there are some for 2,4-D and dicamba, which are other fairly non-selective herbicides. I don't really feel like providing a crop resistance to herbicide necessarily translates to reduced pesticide use. Maybe if you're entirely reliant on herbicides, but if you don't use them, then certainly that's less herbicides. If you buy a seed that is really built around an herbicide, you're going to use herbicide. The other major trait is a gene actually from a Bacillus thuringiensis. It's an insect toxin gene, and it's actually used, the raw bacteria is a major pest management input that we use in organics and have for over 100 years. It's mostly used for caterpillars, which you do sometimes find on your broccoli, as she stated.
I was wondering that.
And there's a lot to unpack. Me personally, if you never find any insects on your produce, then it's been dosed pretty hard with some broad spectrum neurotoxins largely. And it's very likely that the level of residual on that crop is totally safe to eat, but it was definitely there. If you find the occasional aphid or caterpillar on your produce, that's a pretty good indication that it's maybe a little more hospitable to life. And whether or not you get an acute toxic dose from these compounds is one question. But for me, just from the environmental standpoint, if the production system is using them, that's denuding, the surrounding environment of insect life, and that's not the greatest thing. In terms of price point and the sort of privilege talk, and I'll go back to that. I think, the goal of our food system should be to provide healthy, nutritious food for everyone. Organics tend to be more expensive. The reason for that is there's a lot more labor. A lot of that's because we don't use herbicides. There's a lot more hand weeding in organic crops. There's some novel mechanization that's coming to fore that's going to reduce that. Also, the fertility inputs we use are more expensive. So it's really about making sure the farmer makes money so they stay in business. But, overall, I think there were some good points in there. The GM point, certainly, I mean, there's only a handful of crops that are GM. I guess I left out alfalfa and sugar beets earlier. And there might be one or two more. I think there was a GM wheat. I don't know if that's actually in production. There was a lot of controversy around that one. Sorry, I just went on for a long time, but there was a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. I know Dr. Grieshop kind of touched on all the points, but if you would like to add anything.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
He kind of touched on everything.
Really quick, you were saying you named a pesticide that you said killed insects, but you said it killed everything else too. Can you specify
what that
was?
Our agricultural systems, I mean, and this is, again, as someone who's worked in pest management, I'm not a black hat, white hat farmer person. I support farmers and farming. When I have farmed myself, I have chosen to farm organically. I mostly work with organic farmers. So I just like to preface that because it's not about calling people bad or good. And to me, that's like the weirdest thing about this video is it's very confrontational. Mm-hmm. That said, there is some nasty confrontational marketing by, on the other side of the cash register out there in terms of organics, and I don't particularly appreciate that either. But to get to your questions here, there's a whole variety of different insecticides that are used. But if you look at the history of insecticides in, Western industrialized agriculture, it really started after World War II. And so the first group of insecticides that were very prevalent were the chlorinated hydrocarbons. So this includes DDT, which of course had a lot of deleterious effects on birds. It also fostered resistance in insect populations very rapidly, so it became less effective. Then we moved, so DDT works on a sodium channel in the insect nervous system. And interestingly enough, it really doesn't, the reason it got so used is that it doesn't really interact with vertebrate nervous systems the way it does with insects. So it's largely from an acute toxicity standpoint, so I mean kill you right now standpoint, it's really safe. There are a variety of long-term oncogenic and mutagenic, so meaning like birth defects and cancers and things like that did become associated with that class of insecticides due to its heavy use. But that comes from long-term exposure, not from a single dose, right? So then we move to the so this gets so technical, the organophosphates and the carbamates. And so the carbamates are actually originally a natural pesticide derived from castor beans, but we use synthetic chemistry to develop those molecules largely from fossil fuels again. And then the organophosphates, those work on a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine esterase. So acetylcholine esterase strips acetylcholine from between nerve synapses. So in a nerve, in your nervous system, you have your nerves firing, and that's like a network that's connected, but where they're not connected, so to get messages from one nerve cluster to the other, where there's not literally like a nerve or a wire connecting it, it's chemistry. And so acetylcholine, when it attaches to a nerve cluster, it tells it to fire. Acetylcholine esterase strips it off. The organophosphates and carbamates basically monkey wrench that system so that your nerves just continually fire. And unfortunately, those insecticides are quite toxic to vertebrates. And in fact, sarin gas is an organophosphate. There's a variety of war chemicals that are organophosphates. So the biochemistry of that insecticide is fairly hazardous. And we've largely moved away from those as a result. Then there are pyrethroids, which also works on sodium channels slightly differently than the chlorinated hydrocarbons. And there's a variety of other compounds. But where I can take all this and try to bring it home is that the performance characteristics of these insecticides were that they're cheap, they kill on contact, they're broad spectrum, meaning they kill across a wide selection of insect life, and they have a long residual. So they last, 14, 21, in the case of chlorinated hydrocarbons, sometimes months in the field. So that provides a really good way to apply a little and kill the pest, but you're killing everything else as well, because it's a broad spectrum killer. The organic products tend to be much more tuned into a specific insect or group of insects. And I'm just giving a lecture.
Okay. We're going to move on. That was really, I've never heard of, what was that word?
Acetylcholine?
Yeah.
Esterase? Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah. Important neurotransmitter. Got to have it. Well, both of them.
Now we're going to play another TikTok that's a little bit more informational. So if the production team would like to put that up.
The food system is broken when you have to pay more for food that's grown fresh from the earth and pay less for food that's created in a lab.
It's kind of short, not a lot to say on that one, but yeah, I thought it was aesthetic. I liked the kids playing in the garden. It was cute.
It's very cute.
What do you think?
Again, I think it was cute. I liked the kids playing in the garden. I just thought it was interesting the way she worded it, that food growing from the ground, you have to pay for more. But it's like, this might sound dumb, but doesn't all produce come from the ground no matter what? Maybe Dr. Grieshop can help me out, but it just didn't make sense.
I mean, to me, this is one of these things. I mean, we as humans, we habituate to our environment very quickly. And so, I grew up in Northern California. I come from a generation, for example, we ate raspberries when they were in season and we picked them. And now I can go to pretty much any supermarket and get raspberries 24/7, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that happens is because we have this globalized food system where raspberries are being flown in from all over the world so that we can enjoy those raspberries. And that has a heavy cost associated with it. I don't know about lab-grown food, but the basis of most people's diets, and certainly before we had refrigerated trucks and rail cars and air cargo and all of these incredibly energy intensive and fast ways to move food around, our diets really consisted more locally of what you could grow, and it was more seasonal. And if you lived in a place where there's winter a lot, you probably had a lot of processed grains, potatoes, things like that. And those kinds of crops are easier and cheaper to grow than produce. Produce is it's much, whether you grow it conventionally or organically, a lot more time, effort, and labor goes into an acre of broccoli, say, than an acre of corn, of field corn, or soybeans, or sugar beets. And I'll stop there.
All of them.
I left wheat out again. But yeah, wheat. I used to work in wheat. I should mention wheat. Yep.
Weed like weeds in the ground?
Wheat. So
like
wheat. Yeah, like wheat.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was like.
And really, again, this is one of those things that I think, people, we fixate on produce, but, civilizations really run on grains and pulses. So grains would be wheat, corn, rice, et cetera. Pulses would be things like, black beans, pinto beans, other dry beans, soybeans.
Yummy.
That's where we get the bulk of our calories, whether it's directly eating them, which is in most of human agricultural history, or if we feed them to animals first and then eat the animals. And then the produce and everything is an important part of our diet. But once we kind of started agriculture, we really became dependent on grains and pulses, legumes. So it's nuanced, and it's I'm not a big conspiracy fan. I think that the arc of history is nuanced and complicated, and people are just doing the best they can, and we end up somewhere. That doesn't mean we shouldn't question it. We shouldn't try to improve it, but I think we're much more successful at that when we really think about that long-term history and how we got to where we're at, rather than just trying to find an easy villain to point at. It's just I don't think it works very well.
Yeah. Sierra?
Yeah, I think if her argument is that it's better or healthier to eat food straight out of the ground, don't we think that caveman would have had a longer life expectancy, or people back then? I feel like back then people got sick a lot more often and they didn't live as long, and now we're living till what's the average age, 80? That's pretty good. And I feel like, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I just feel like
but so much of that is civilization, right?
Yeah.
The consistency of food supply, the availability of medicine. The other person was talking about science, which is really, science is not a thing. It's a philosophy. It's a way we generate knowledge and communicate it. But those are the benefits of civilization.
Yeah, but a lot of disease comes from the food that we eat, and that's
oh, for sure. And actually, if you look at the anthropological records, they can usually tell when a society got into agriculture, because there's a lot more bone problems and teeth problems because of reduced diversity of diet. But infant mortality rates are typically a lot higher in those, static civilization societies. And it's, once we grabbed onto agriculture as a species, it changed us in a kind of an irrevocable way, I think. So I'm like,
no, you're good.
I'm a recovering professor today.
Now we're going to look at a TikTok that the little text says, organic food still sprayed with pesticides, ?
Says organic doesn't mean it wasn't sprayed with pesticides and herbicides.
We already know that non-organic crops use synthetic fertilizers, synthetic pesticides and herbicides, and most likely GMOs. But did you know that organic crops can still be sprayed with pesticides and herbicides? That's right, but the big difference is that the types of substances allowed in organic farming are strictly regulated and are generally derived from natural sources, as opposed to synthetic chemicals often used in conventional farming.
That was good. At the end, he
brought it home.
Yeah, he brought it back.
The big problem is the herbicides. We have almost no effective herbicides in organic agriculture. There are a few that have some usage in a few cropping systems, but by and large, herbicides are for weed management. Almost all weed management is done through either crop rotation or physical means, so cultivation, or people in the field with hose.
Or the new
well, there's laser weeders.
The lasers.
Yeah. So we do have laser weeders now, and we have robot mechanical weeders that replace people with hose. But in terms of, and this is one of the other sort of weird things and where words matter. So pesticide has a legal definition with the EPA, and it doesn't just refer to insects. It actually includes herbicides. A pesticide is a compound that you use to manage an organism you don't want. So that could include a weed, it could be a fungus, it could be an insect, it could be, so, there are insecticides that we use for insects, there are fungicides we use for fungal pathogens, there are herbicides we use for weeds. In the organic world, we have almost no herbicides. We have some insecticides and some fungicides. And I talked way too long about insecticides. So I'm not sure
I saw a
to open
TikTok
that
today
box.
that was a drone dropping ladybugs.
Yep,
That was
that's
cool.
something that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
ethical? They just like drop like.
Well, they fly.
They fly.
Oh,
They're
Yeah.
probably
they
like.
fly. They fly. I forgot that part.
I like
That's
to,
actually the
I think it's low too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's some questions about how well it works, but the strawberry industry here in California actually uses a lot of drone delivery for predatory mites. And,
Oh.
you tend to see it in higher dollar crops like vineyards and strawberries, in lower dollar, lower margin crops like a lot of our vegetable crops, which you just don't make as much money per acre on. It's just too expensive a solution, so they don't tend to use that so
Yeah.
much. But it's pretty cool.
It
Yeah,
is
I mean,
cool.
they rear these insects in a lab or an insectary, and then they load them up in these canisters, and then they fly them out in a drone and drop them.
Better
Which is
hope
actually
their
a-
wings are working that day. They
Yeah, you hope. And some of them aren't. Some of it, they drop eggs actually, insect
Oh.
eggs and nymphs
Oh.
and things. When you're that little, gravity just doesn't affect you quite.
Yeah, I
If
feel
you
like
drop,
it'd,
if you
hurt
drop
them.
me from 10 feet,
Oh yeah.
I probably wouldn't get up again.
Probably
But
would
a
have.
little tiny lacewing egg or something, or a mite, it's it's one of the cool things about being that small is gravity's just different. But yeah, that's really cool. And actually, fun fact, one of the Parabug, which is one of the companies that provides this service in California, is actually a product of Cal Poly students.
Really?
So,
Oh.
yeah. So one of our ag engineering students is involved in starting that company and
cool.
running it. So,
Represent.
We love Cal Poly students and alumni.
yeah. of
Speaking of Cal Poly, now we're going to go to the Grimm Organic Center where Dr. Grieshop runs, the boss for
Yeah.
Dr. Grimm.
Dr. Grimm, as we call him today.
course. Oh no.
I really liked how they showed the process of transplanting. I think
Yeah.
not everyone knows
Yeah.
what it looks like for produce to be transplanted, so that was cool.
I think also from a communication standpoint, the way they just showed students and had the song in the background makes it relatable for people who don't necessarily know or / care about organics. They're like, oh, wait, that's kind of cool. And it's relatable. So I just had to make that
Yeah.
comment, even though it's not scientific based.
No, of course. I think that's the point. It's just to kind of showcase that piece of ag that so few of us get to experience.
I also
Yeah.
don't have a scientific based comment. It was cute. I like the song. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all.
And it's amazing. I mean, those transplants that were going into that transplanter, that it's a carousel transplanter, all of those were grown in a greenhouse. And so, these seeds were grown in a greenhouse in plug trays. Those plug trays come out to the field. We transplant those into the field. And then they get a chance to become big plants. And that might have been cabbage. And then we get to eat the cabbage. But it's this incredible, there's so many steps to the process and a lot of care and labor and time goes into it. And for conventional produce too, frankly, there's a lot of care and time, and it's a labor of love.
It's cool to see other students too working out on the farm like
Yeah.
that and being like, you can do that if they're doing it.
If you're a student and you work with us at the organic farm, you get to do all kinds of stuff. And running a transplanter is sort of one of them. And if you're on the organic side, mowing weeds is another one. And
Learn by doing.
I think it's
I'm out there
time
with them
to
too. So yeah.
to say if any summer interns or
Oh, yeah.
spring because you
Yeah. So, I mean, by the time we release
oh,
this
that's
one,
true by the time it's released.
But no, we're always looking for students to hire. Usually we do a big recruitment in the first couple weeks of spring
Maybe
quarter.
spring 2025 then by the
this
time
case,
this comes
yep.
out.
Yep.
We're going to look at another TikTok from the Grimm Center. I think it's about a day in the life kind of.
Very Central Coast vibes.
Yes.
So those flowers are really important. The leading edge organic growers in the Central Coast are really moving towards planting a lot of beneficial habitat. It's kind of like I was talking ad nauseum about insecticides earlier. Those flowers are the opposite. So if, any place we can't put a crop in, if we can grow perennial flowers and annual flowers, we're providing really important habitat for beneficial insects. So pollinators, predators, things that help us manage pests.
Yep. We love
Yep.
love the flowers.
And they're just great to look at, right?
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
super pretty.
I know. I've
Yep.
seen some when I'm driving in my hometown, there's like romaine planted, and then like there's a strip of like all
Yeah.
these different kind of flowers.
Yeah, that's exactly what
pretty.
it's for. And sometimes we put sweet alyssum and other things in the field too. And the idea is you're creating kind of like a metropolis for your beneficial insects, and then you put little like subdivisions out in your cropland so that they move out and then do the good things you want them to do.
I just learned about sweet alyssum in my plant science class. I had to identify it on an identification test.
Oh, cool.
I got that one because it doesn't have a scientific name.
Like the whole point of ag communications is to advocate for the industry and show how stuff works, because a lot of consumers don't know how is stuff transplanted, why are there flowers in the field, so I think it's nice that they make these TikToks and people get to see them.
And people kind of go down rabbit holes of if that like popped up on my For You page and I knew nothing about organics, I'd be like, oh, it's my school, I'm kind of interested in this, I'm gonna go scroll. So I think it's super cool to have students who are just broadcasting things like this for people who just are laying in bed on a Tuesday night on their phone, and they're like, oh, there's something about organics. It really pushes out the ideology and the info.
Yeah, it was fun to watch, entertaining, and got to the point. I would have watched it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the hope, is that, we really, again, it's not about white hat, black hat. It's about getting people engaged with agriculture. We're organic farmers and organic researchers, educators, so that's the flavor of ag that we do. But, we all rely on ag. It's a central point of our civilization.
Yeah.
We all like to eat. That's where it comes from.
I feel like people nowadays also don't necessarily watch long form videos, so the short TikToks, it catches their attention really, really quickly.
So they don't want to hear about acetylcholinesterase.
I mean, I'm sure everyone does. It was great. I learned a lot hearing about that.
I'm just teasing.
And I feel like a lot of people associate ag with being super hick, but ag is everything. Ag is everything.
Yeah.
And they come at me you're not really a farm girl, but it's food, it's everything.
To be successful in ag, you have to be good at everything.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of farming and I was miserable at it. You've got to, seriously, you have to be on point as a biologist. You've got to be a project manager. You have to be good at marketing. You have to be good at labor relations. You have to be a good mechanic. That's
business smart.
Yeah, business smart.
Totally.
It's a tough business, and but it's also, I think, the folks that get into it, why they're so passionate. And again, this is why, not black hat, not white hat. It's a fulfilling lifestyle, because you're always being humbled by everything, and there's always something new to learn. There's always a way to do things better, and there's just problems to solve all the time.
I used to be I don't really know about my major at comms, and now I defend that.
Good.
I am honored, because it's everything. It's taught me a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now we're going to show some TikToks, once you buy your food, what kind of cool recipes you can make with some organic products.
Oh, cool.
Or do you want the factory one? Oh. Or the harvesting.
The recipes?
Never mind. We're going to look at some harvesting. I feel like
Celery.
a lot of labor goes into harvesting celery, too, because don't they have to cut it with knives?
So
It's not like
whole
a
crew.
spinach.
Oh.
Yeah.
So broccoli, cauliflower also, but there's a whole crew engaged there. So you've got folks on the ground cutting it, putting it up on, they've got this sort of mobile packing line machine, and
It's hard work.
And they were quick, too.
Yeah.
It's so much skill. I have so much respect, and I really feel like farm workers are really, in many ways, the unsung heroes of our civilization. I think about trying to move a celery knife that fast and cut celery out of the ground.
Probably cut my finger off.
Yeah, it would be real quick. I wouldn't have any fingers left. And these folks, they really bring it. And we all benefit as a result.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I just really like how it says, you can thank our farmers and harvesters who work so hard to keep up with the soaring demand. And I think it's cute because it was just short and just quick, and it was a video of them doing their work, but then it's also a big company that's verified, that's just saying thank your harvesters and thank your farmers, which I feel is super important.
Yeah, Earthbound's really good about that. If anyone looks at their Instagram reels, it's always they're very informational, but then they're making sure to thank the farm workers and the farmers, and I think that's really nice.
They don't get enough
respect.
Yeah.
Respect. Not nearly enough.
I used to drink 32 ounces of celery juice every day for 2 years straight, and I never got sick. And now I don't, because at school I don't have a juicer, but now I get sick.
That's
It's
like
and
dedication.
like I feel bad for how much like work they do, because my mom would go to Costco and not just buy the bags of celery, but like the whole box that carries all the bags.
Lot of celery.
She would get like those like big red carts and pack on celery boxes. Anyways, next
How many
job.
pounds of celery is in 32 ounces
I
of
don't know, but
celery
like
juice?
jars like that big, and she make me, well, not force me. My mom's she doesn't force me, but like that much every single morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, celery is mostly
It
water.
made me
but-
feel so good. It's good for your skin, hair, and
Yeah,
nails.
I eat celery pretty much every day.
I like celery.
Okay, after watching all those great TikToks, I'd like to ask the panel for some closing thoughts.
I just would like to say I like seeing agriculture broadcasted across social media platforms. As an ag communication student, it's been super cool to watch these platforms. And normally, like, I would just watch beauty and hair stuff. But now that I looked these up, they're going to come up on my For You page, and it's super interesting to learn in the short form. So it's kind of my closing statement.
Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot. I like hearing things from both sides, and also I respect that you can respect people from both sides. You had good things to say about both. I also learned a lot specifically from this one, just like how they collect all the celery. I didn't realize they have like those big machines, but yeah, super cool.
Yeah, no, for me, it's, anything we can do to make more people aware of how important agriculture is in their daily lives, and how it's something to really be embraced is a positive thing. I mean, and for me, again, that's it. We don't need to attack each other. I mean, there's really, and when I say this, when I'm working with other agriculturalists, regardless of our personal philosophies on how we should grow food, there's very few of us in this society. I mean, one of the miraculous things about our society is there's maybe 4 million people, including farm workers, that feed all of us in a country of 350 million people. And that's an amazing accomplishment. It also provides us a challenge to communicate with the massive population. So all of this is great. I mean, I would love to see more of it. And I'm hoping to, the center and, this podcast series and everything else can be a part of that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Dr. Grieshop. I think the whole point of like advocating for agriculture and showing how stuff happens and everything is like the point of agriculture communications, and they need more consumers to know like every segment of the ag industry. So I hope everyone enjoyed this episode and these TikToks, and have a great day.
Program funding for the Organic Odyssey was provided by the California Certified Organic Farmers Foundation, as well as the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. The show was created by Matt Grieshop, the talent coordinator and resident organic expert, as well as Moses Mike, the faculty production lead. The guest on this episode was Sierra Fugman. The Organic Odyssey is a production of the AGC 225 class called Digital Communications in Agriculture. The student team that produced the show included Andrew Angulo, the director, hosts Amanda Kidd and Emery Pura, and the technical team, Bailey Knirk, Daniela Rodriguez-Ruiz, Delaney Browder, Katie Cook, and Sierra Fugman. The Organic Odyssey is a digital media collaboration between the Agricultural Education and Communications Department and the Grimm Family Center for Organic Production and Research at Cal Poly. These credits were read by Chelsea Ann. Thanks for listening.